Greetings, shippers. This one has not only been a long time coming, but it has also been highly requested. So for all of you who have been waiting on bated breath, it's finally time to take a look at Batjokes, the pairing of Batman and the Joker. Batman and the Joker have a long canon history across multiple mediums, so get ready, this is gonna be a long one. But I know deep down you guys love that. The Joker made his first comic appearance in 1940 and was actually lucky to survive his first outing, saved by editorial intervention, as the potential for his character as a juxtaposition against the Dark Knight was recognized. His whole creation history is convoluted and full of improperly assigned credit, as is alas the case with a lot of comic history. But suffice it to say, Batman's arch-nemesis nearly died in their first outing, until at the last minute some panels were added showing his resurrection, thus beginning right from his conception the uncanny ability to survive deadly situations no matter how obviously lethal. From the beginning, it was clear the Joker was an integral part of the Batman universe, more so than Batman's other villains. However, it took some time for writers to move beyond the surface opposites and begin to weave in some parallels, and really begin to explore just how important these characters were to each other. As the Silver Age of comics wanes and the Bronze Age emerges, more emphasis was placed on psychological backstories in comics. Characters became more complex and their motivations were more thoroughly examined. And then with the modern era came a whole new level of investment in the comic medium as an art form and vehicle for telling complex as well as sometimes very disturbing stories. During these periods, Batman and the Joker's relationship became more and more defined, and in many writers and fans' eyes, more and more codependent. The Joker's obsession with Batman began to take a more pointed turn, coming to the point where his whole purpose for being was Batman, and this all-encompassing emotional energy he dedicated to him, an energy some labeled as a sick, twisted love. Narratively, his origin even became, in some cases, tied to the Dark Knight. Even though that was never made the official backstory, it low-key is the very accepted one. The question then became for some, particularly fans, was this level of obsession platonic, romantic, sexual, all of the above? Could it fall into any defined category at all given the Joker's insanity? And in a much more recent development, was it completely one-sided? Characters grow and change over time, coming to reflect the attitudes of not only the current social climate they reside in, but also taking on the interpretations of new creators, and most likely previous fans who have come before, who have formed their own interpretations on these characters based upon certain kernels they found in previous works. As a result, at this point in the two characters' history, the Joker's need for Batman is quite well established in canon. No matter the version or how many Jokers there are, the man's life revolves around Batman, making sure he is the one to toy with him, to have all his focus and be his #1 priority. The things he demands make him appear like an extremely clingy, emotionally abusive boyfriend, an aspect that was much parodied in 2017's Lego Batman movie.
There is no us. Never will be.
In various canons, the Joker has ranged from turning completely sane after Batman's seeming death, seeking revenge against the man responsible for Batman's seeming death after holding a very Joker-style funeral,
Without Batman, crime has no punchline.
entering a catatonic state after Batman's retirement, only re-emerging upon his return, attempting to murder his entire family to make sure only he has his attention, and on top of that, there is the flirtation, the use of pet names and sexual innuendo that varies its use depending upon the writer. All of this has pointed to a less than healthy interest in Batman, to which most would say, well, obviously, he's an insane psychopathic clown fighting a man with severe PTSD in a bat suit. What were you expecting? Well, for some creators, the reciprocity of Batman's relationship with the Joker has become an element for exploration. Is the need mutual? Does Batman need the Joker to function, as well as a way of managing his own demons? Many iterations have explored the concept of Batman having sympathy for the villains he captures, and even having a desire to see them reform. But some also explored the idea of him needing villains in order to stave off his own unhealthy obsessions. With Batman, this tends to be more of a general need though, and less of a Joker-specific one, except in certain instances. For example, the AU universe of Injustice. This isn't a full one, but it is one where an unhinged Superman accuses him of it. However, Batman has saved the Joker's life multiple times, either from certain death, be it at the hands of the Punisher or Nightwing, or even the justice system, when the Joker was charged with a crime he didn't commit. These actions allowed a mass murderer who would no doubt kill again essentially free, because who are we kidding? We've seen Arkham Security. So basically, free to kill again. This subject has been discussed in numerous philosophical texts, both serious and pseudo, but over time, all of these overlapping canons and story threads began to really ignite shippers. Batjokes started out as a pretty small ship, very much on the fringes of fandom in the early 90s through the early 2000s, though it probably existed beforehand but is a bit harder to track down. And even then, it was pretty difficult to find fics about these two. It was almost treated like a crack ship due to its canonical impossibility. More on that later. However, it was clearly not being written or depicted as such by its fans. Lots of the early fics explored the Joker's one-sided or seemingly one-sided attraction to Batman, culminating in a one-night-only situation. These tended to come from the comics or the animated series, as while Tim Burton's Batman had a lot going for it, romantic chemistry between the hero and the villain wasn't one of those things. Even though the Joker's name being Jack was a readily accepted fact for a while, this sometimes still pops up in fics for those who don't favor an identityless Joker. Another popular trope played upon Bruce's sympathy for his rogues gallery, and played upon the idea of Batman having to nurse a sick or injured Joker back to health in the Batcave, with the close proximity bringing on some intimate changes in their relationship, either through Batman seeing a more sympathetic side of the Joker that must be helped, or through the gradual erosion of his own mental state and boundaries through the Joker's unique form of manipulation, and of course, sometimes both. However, a huge boost for this ship arrived in 2008, in the form of The Dark Knight. Nolan's Batman films, whether one likes or dislikes them, and despite all the acclaim, there are people making arguments for both sides. Of this film trilogy, the one to garner the most buzz and acclaim for a variety of reasons was The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight focused largely and vocally on the relationship between Christian Bale's Batman and Heath Ledger's Joker. It had been the first live-action encounter between these two since Burton's Batman back in 1989, and Ledger's performance is considered by many to be the titular live-action Joker. And in terms of the grim, realistic universe set up by Nolan, his performance works perfectly and is in harmony with that universe. Bale's Batman in Nolan's world is an isolated figure who is very much presented as using Bruce Wayne as a mask for his true Batman persona, to the point where the character of Bruce Wayne is near non-existent. However, perhaps because of this, or simply the added boost of the live-action element, which can sometimes galvanize shippers in the way printed text cannot, this ship exploded. There were tons of fics for these two from the Nolanverse. In fact, for a time, it was difficult to find anything else. The two characters' isolation from the rest of the universe, both through different means and choices, led to a variety of fics and interpretations. Also, the series' willing division from most Batman lore meant that the canon was largely free and clear for fans to play with, adding and removing the elements they desired, and being able to steer clear of the overly problematic, though the whole ship in general is very dark. After this boon, the ship became more mainstream and it spread beyond the confines of fics about this film, instead spreading to just being about the two in general, drawing from multiple sources, and interest in producing material about the Joker rose again in the comic world, as is always the case when a piece of horizontally marketed material proves to be very popular. So on the whole, what is the appeal of this ship? Well, the ship functions largely as an exploration of the already existing dynamics between the characters. This relationship is very much happening and is integral to the mythos. The only question for some fans is how far is it going / how far can it go? And is it a sexual one? Not all the fics focus on the sexual aspect, however. The main component, outside of PWPs of course, which are fine, get your smut on. However, outside of those, people are interested in exploring the nature of the narrative similarities that have emerged between these characters. As mentioned in The Killing Joke, it only takes one bad day to change a person. How different are these characters actually? Do their respective darknesses complement each other? And could their clashes result in more than just an explosion of violence? For many, the answer is yes, and this element is readily explored in a variety of styles of fiction. From a retired Batman who now shares a home with a retired nemesis who no longer causes mayhem because his Dark Knight is no longer there to catch him, to brooding one-shots about the Joker crafting his crimes so that Batman will come to him. And always a fave? The Joker having the city in peril and coercing Batman into some form of affection, be it a kiss or full-on sex in exchange for, say, the release of hostages or the location of a bomb. There is also the two must team up to take on the bigger threat trope, a plot that loosely appears in the comic Europa, which holds many other fanfic tropes as well, and bears several similarities to stories that have appeared in various archives. It's worth a read if you want to see some near-canon Batjokes, and see some unique artwork. Another aid in the ship's appeal was the rise in internet culture in general, and sharing sites / forums, etc. All of a sudden, panels and clips and instances of these two having suggestive interactions, or interactions that could be interpreted that way, could be compiled side by side and viewed as a whole, rather than fans having a piece here and a piece there. A complete picture of all this side by side also ignited the imaginations of some. In general, the ship is dark and violent in its base nature, though of course people love their fluff. However, aside from the knee-jerk reaction of they're mortal enemies, this could never happen, what other obstacles await this pair? Well, earlier I mentioned canon implausibility. Well, aside from that, which admittedly has never stopped a determined shipper and never would, there is also the fact that unless it is a one-off or a situational style fic, in order for the ship to work, one or both of the characters need to fundamentally change. And we're going to bypass the Joker sexuality debate, which is long, convoluted, and has been going on for years. Basically, it boils down to people seeking some kind of canon label for the Clown Prince of Crime. However, many feel that like most aspects of his story, the less information the better, as it keeps the character moldable and adds to the level of chaos he can bring/represent, particularly in regards to Batman. No matter the level of obsession present in these two, or the canonical level of the Joker's love, these two are still antagonists. Yes, they've saved each other countless times, but nothing about their actions are healthy, cute, or even romanticized. And unlike, say, the Joker and Harley, a romantic element was never explicitly stated and mapped for these characters. At least not in the traditional sense. A lot has happened between these two that are clear relationship enders, not just for them, but for the people around them. For example, the murder of Jason Todd. That's a huge narrative hurdle to overcome. It works fine if the goal is hate sex, but if the goal is actual romantic entanglement, it's a stretch to believe that the man who altered his whole life because his parents were murdered in front of him as a child would forgive the man who murdered his own son, shot another, threatened all of them, crippled a friend, and regularly senselessly murders innocent victims. As a result, for those shipping that kind of relationship, it either works better in certain canons where these events have not taken place, or in works that actually explore the fallout of others finding out about such a relationship, which would prove to be the end of pretty much everything for Bruce. I mean, can you imagine everyone's reactions? One way to circumvent this are fics where the Joker reforms, and while some are incredibly well written and compelling, at the end of the day, a reformed Joker isn't really the Joker at all. As a result, to make this work in a more long-term fashion as a ship, you end up with a character who doesn't fully resemble their base model, making them a little or a lot OOC. Some of the difficulty, of course, comes from the fact that in comics, characters rarely progress. Instead, they reach certain milestones and their characters are then maintained there, with certain traits shifting around them rather than either moving forward or being replaced. Because people don't want to let go of these characters. They want to see them in ever new situations that reflect the world around them. As such, the relationship between these two in canon and fanon will always wax and wane as Batman and the Joker vary from time period to time period and universe to universe. The only certain thing is that they always match. Their interactions are measured in reaction to the other. For example, a more fun, explicit take on this pairing from the Lego Batman movie, which is free to more fully explore and lampoon this aspect of the two characters as it is a parody. The two are already exaggerated versions of their base and more rarely explored traits, so it works, and the two still balance each other out. As these two exist in relation to each other, this ship will most likely always sail on, but unless something fundamentally shifts, the only place these two are getting a traditional happy ending is online. As always, there is no right or wrong way to ship, and there are fun fics to be found in any style for these two. It just depends on what floats your boat, and of course for some, it simply isn't their cup of tea. However, for most shippers, the appeal of this ship doesn't lie in a traditional happy ending. This pairing is a dark one, exploring many different psychological issues, working through pathos, isolation, madness, and so much more. It's unique in the realm of villain-hero ships and how much canon is legitimately devoted to just these two characters. There's a huge base to work off of, and that's very exciting for some people. And it's ever expanding. Another plus. People want to see these two interact in any way they can think of. Heck, even Suicide Squad, which has its haters, has drawn out fics of Leto's Joker and Affleck's Batman. And some are really good. This pairing is a complex one, and the people who dedicate themselves to it range from the extremely introspective, producing complex works, be they one-shots or multi-chapter epics. And most who ship this have a good sense of humor, which is required when you're shipping the Joker. Why so serious indeed? There's room for fun and crack in any ship. Is this one a fandom darling? By no means, but it doesn't have to be, and it's one of those ships that thrives, whether it adds the sexual component or just sticks to more gen-style works. Are you guys Batjokes shippers? Which versions of the characters do you like to pair together and why? Share your thoughts down below. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Turn on that bell notification to never miss a vid, and as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.